Cheers, guys. Epics 911, welcome to VR Roundup on a Game Friday. Hopefully I don't continue to lose the voice. You know what? Game Friday, the only thing I've ever said about rules are there are no rules. General debauchery, bad drink, bad food, doesn't even have to be video games. Could be card games. Hell, you could read comic books. Probably not Ghost Rider. Thanks to this guy who's made it for me so that I cannot not see his mug when I'm reading what was a pretty decent comic book in Ghost Rider. With the exception of maybe Kick-Ass, which I really liked. I thought it was a great movie. But if I'm being honest, a dozen actors could have played that part and it still would have been an awesome movie. The rest, pretty much stinkers. So somebody thought it would be a great idea to take his latest movie, it's called The Human Bureau, and do a VR episodic spin-off. And what's really cool, guys, is they got super clever with the name. Get this, it's called The Human Bureau V Revolution. Get it? They took the VR from virtual reality, added evolution, so it's VR, but really V Revolution. Isn't that clever? Yeah, no, it's not. And guys, it's 2018. We don't need to see any more plays on the acronym. You can look back at videos from a year ago, me saying it's not creative. And you know what? It still isn't creative. Please let that die and come up with an original name. Easy for me to say using VR podcast, but I digress. We've spoken a lot on this channel about virtual reality arcades. We've taken a look at local operations here in my adopted new city of Halifax, like Halifax VR Arcade. We've talked about commercial operations like IMAX and The Void. One of my best memories, guys, coming from Europe, age 10, walking into the Guildford Town Shopping Centre in the city of Surrey, which was part of Metro Vancouver, and walking through the doorway of Circuit Circus, which was an arcade in the mall. Guys, stepping into that doorway, into the future, impossible to explain to anybody who didn't experience it. Kind of like trying to explain VR to someone who hasn't experienced it. Well, a company by the name of AI Solve, they're creating a modular approach to VR arcades. They want some of that back. Because face it, shopping malls have basically become retail, clothing, or shoe outlets. They used to be destinations for entertainment, for socializing. I remember that same mall had an ice skating rink, the food courts, which they all still have food courts, but theaters, arcades, sadly, mostly all gone. Well, back to the pod itself, the WeplayVR, 6x6 grids, haptic floor tiles that vibrate. They can be configured any number of ways. You could have a rectangle, a square, two smaller rooms with a hallway, pretty much whatever you dream up, the pod then configured around it. They've got HTC Vives for their hardware for the VR solution, MSI backpacks to complete that. Those are the PCs. They even have custom experiences for the pods like Alien Invasion, which doesn't have super polished graphics, but according to the article is very immersive and the type of short, bursty, arcade-friendly experience you would want. And where it does seem to be advantageous to kind of have this modular format is the interface. So you get a computer with it. You also get a touch screen front panel on the pod affixed to the outside with its own front-end system to integrate into, say, Steam VR or one of the other solutions. Units are priced, and this is a basic setup, which is 2 VR headsets, 2 backpacks, 4 controllers, the pod frame, vibrating floor tiles, control computer, and a spectator screen, $55,000 US. So not cheap, but if you're serious about this, it's a way to do it very modularly. includes one game for the first year, and then $1,500 per year for continued use of the game. Additional games cost $5,000 to $10,000 for the first year, and then $1,500 afterwards. Just a note, the pods can also have racing pod attachments added. There's currently 16 locations listed on their website, and they have 40 more planned before the summer. Now, you may be thinking, Epix, why don't they just load up Steam VR, use those games, etc.? And the reason is, it's not technically legal. You could, but then you'd be violating the EULA. The End User License Agreement specifically states you can't commercialize. That's why HTC offers other solutions for arcade vendors, and why the pod company is going about it this way. Next up, many of us as kids made paper airplanes, and we'd have contests for aerodynamics. How far could they fly? How long? How high? Well, I remember the excitement of me and my friends trying to find the highest place, maybe a balcony or a rooftop, see what kind of distance we could get. Hell, YouTuber Tucker Gott, he's the paramotor enthusiast. I've mentioned him once or twice in the past. He had a whole video about throwing a paper airplane from 2,000 feet and then trying to catch it. If you're curious, yes, he did catch it. Well, the VR title Paper Valley is all about exactly that, paper airplanes. Using the Oculus Touch or Vive wands, the setting of the game is a very windy garden with lots of obstacles, set pieces, etc. You throw the paper airplane at various targets, so you got to factor in wind, all of those things from a technical point of view, and that leads to increasing challenges. Some very simple, some extremely difficult, that scale as you go further into the game. No price or release date as of yet, but I'll keep you posted. And then this article on Upload VR stating, forget room scale, think building scale. That's exactly what Nagoya University is doing via one of its PhD professors, a fellow by the name of Katashi Nagayo. He has a host of hardware and software, which includes a room scanning robot that can create 3D maps of real-world environments. It uses an RGB depth camera and image data from a 4K panoramic camera, so it can capture not just the exterior of buildings, but the interior as well, top to bottom. The end goal of this, to create disaster scenarios, including fires, earthquakes, floods, and that word which we can't mention because bad things will happen, but you probably know what I'm talking about. If you don't, ask me below in the comments. Right now, as with the arcade pods we talked about just before, they are using Vives and similar backpack PCs, but they've got a very customized tracking system that allows them to track throughout the entire complex, all the rooms, hallways, rooftops, etc. Next up, Labrodex Studios, a studio with the goal to create an environment where they could combine the talent and knowledge of a AAA firm while maintaining the hands-on approach and atmosphere of a smaller indie studio. It's pretty clear with the success of raw data, that has led to a stream of robotic, futuristic, AI-style games. Scraper seems to follow that trend, but they do hope to go about it a little differently. They've injected a bit of uniqueness to that formula. For starters, it doesn't appear to be a wave-based game. Instead, it's a building and terrain crawler. You can see in the screenshots, shows off a sci-fi world of not just interiors, but exteriors as well, city rooftops, etc. In it, you're going to be fighting self-aware android humans and traversing on a hover pad. Now, I had hoped personally in 2018 we would start seeing less exclusives. Unfortunately, this is an exclusive. It's an Oculus One, which is a shame, as a game like this, in my opinion, could benefit so much more from a wider release. Which, guys, my 2 cents and what my thoughts are on this is, you would think it can't be that much of an advantage, this far into VR's launch, not being a AAA publisher, to be offered the kind of funds that would be mind-blowing to be an exclusive. In fact, I would say, I'd go this far, the perception is they're not that comfortable with their product having a wide launch and doing well. Because think about it, if you took this type of game and went on OpenVR, for example, Steam VR via OpenVR, you're not just selling to Rift, you've got Vive, you've got the growing mixed reality market, and then you could also launch with Sony and their over the million mark number of headsets. So the perception to me, and pure speculation perception, it could be completely wrong, it just looks like they're not that confident in their product, that they need that bulk payment up front. Again, I just can't see it being that large to justify missing out on a wider release and building a larger audience, a larger customer base. But hey. And this last story. So, speaking of Oculus, we're going to talk about them again. They have a program that they're calling Oculus Go that they've announced the launch for. What it is a set of resources for up-and-coming developers of VR titles. Now, let's explain the good and then kind of just my thoughts on that. So, how they're going to go about this, they want to offer open lines of communication. So from a development point of view, you've got resources at Oculus that you can count on. There's going to be SDK, dev toolkits, etc., as well as all kinds of other resources. Perhaps it's motion capturing advice, all the other things that go along with it. Their criteria is that they can't have been given $10,000 US or more by a third party. And they list Sony, HTC, for example, Google, etc. You can't, 9,999 apparently, okay, 10,000, that's their cutoff. Also, you have to have already released one game, so one published game. Probably it would have to be an okay game, because why else would they kind of want to support that resource-wise? I suppose to get you better as a developer, that's a possibility. The only thing they don't detail in the article, and I haven't been able to find it out through research, maybe one of you knows, is if you accept this and you enroll in this program, does it preclude you from launching on, say, Steam VR or PlayStation? In other words, do you have to launch on the Oculus Home Store? If you don't, I think it's fantastic. If you do, it still might be okay for devs. Again, like with the prior story, I just don't like the perception and the fact that quite a few years into this now, they're still not willing to be quite as open. But hey, that's their business model. Guys, that's it for this edition of VR Roundup. Like I said, have a fantastic weekend, a kick-arse one. Get some gaming in. I'm serious. If you haven't yet, do it. You'll thank me for it later. Guys, have a fantastic one. We'll catch you for some podcasts. A quick look this weekend will get launched. We'll see you then. Cheers, guys.